Everybody ready? Okay. Scott Air Force Base is an economic driver in our local economy. What's your plan for maintaining and expanding the activities of the base?
Go ahead.
Well, Scott Air Force Base is not just an important economic driver to this district. It's also personally important to me. It's the reason that I'm even part of this community. My family, who both worked for the Department of Defense, moved all over the place. We wound up here when I was 10 years old, 35 years ago. This has been my home ever since because of Scott Air Force Base. The Scott Air Force Base, the impact it has financially on this district simply cannot be underestimated. And we have to understand and have representation in Congress that understands the process by how those decisions are made as to whether or not an asset like that, like Scott Air Force Base, is going to remain here or be taken away. We cannot assume that Scott Air Force Base will stay open. We can't assume that. Anybody who makes that assumption does so at their own peril and at the peril of this entire community. It is $1 billion a year is put into this area as a result of Scott Air Force Base. It's not just this district, it's the entire metropolitan region. And that has ripple effects on so many different parts of our economy, people that rely on that, people that are contractors that work there. That's an important part of that. But the base realignment process called BRAC, that process is something that has been in place for many years, but may yet happen again. For us to be able to survive another round of BRAC, we have to continue to add additional assets, consolidate additional assets at Scott Air Force Base. That is what has kept it alive. It's TRANSCOM. People don't realize this. TRANSCOM is one of the commands that we have as part of the military. There's only a few of those. So this is one of the most important national assets in terms of our national defense, which is right here in Scott Air Force Base. But we have to maintain that and continue to bring additional units to this area. We have to synchronize what we do in Illinois with the Illinois National Guard, make sure those folks stay here. We missed a tremendous opportunity in not getting the NGA to come to this area. That was a failure, okay? And that was on Mike Boss' watch. And now that the decision has been made, and he has friendly people in the Department of Defense, people in the administration, he has done nothing to try to get that decision changed. Or to try to get additional assets to be brought here to make Scott Air Force Base, to make sure we dig in and that this place becomes a solid part of the defense apparatus and that it doesn't go someplace else. So we have to understand the implication of TRANSCOM, how that's involved in our national defense strategy. We have to understand the units that are out there, the Defense Logistics Agency, the other folks that are out there, and the cyber units that have been placed there. We have to make sure that those are just not kept there, but that we continue to build those, add those, and make the case to the defense apparatus that this is the place to continue to bring those defense facilities. There will be more consolidation. We want them to consolidate here, not someplace else.
You know, Brendan mentioned a lot about the process of funding and how it works in the military. And one of the roles I've had in the past is I was a government contractor, and I worked on military installations, installing classified buildings, and I worked specifically in the contracts appropriation department as a project manager. And one of the things you need to understand when you want to keep something on a military base or keep a military base somewhere is the ability to fight for that contract and the ability to value add to that contract. And when we talk about the NGA, and my brother works for the NGA, and they were all fighting, and they all wanted that NGA building to be built in our district. They wanted it there. Unfortunately, we didn't do a good enough job value adding. We did not do a good enough job hiring and working with engineers to make that a more possible proposal to win that contract. And really, what it comes down to is will. Do you have a congressman or a leader who's got the political will and the fight to go in there and say, I'm going to fight for this tooth and nail no matter what to make sure that it happens? And we cannot underestimate the value of Scott Air Force Base. It's its own city. It provides its own economic base to this community, and we have to be willing to fight for it. And no, and Brennan kind of summarized it well. We don't have full control. We never know where military appropriations are going to go. We never know how base realignments are going to enact. There's nobody that controls that. However, we can always have a loud voice. We can always be the loudest voice in the room on any cause that affects our constituency. And that goes back to the fact that we currently have a congressman that doesn't show up, that doesn't have a voice, that doesn't protect his constituents. So how can we trust that he's going to protect Scott Air Force Base when we need him to? And I think you see tonight that I will be that voice that constantly stands up for Scott Air Force Base and other issues in our constituency. And I'm not beholden to anybody. I don't have friends up there that need to pat my back or I pat their back. I'm just going to go in there with the facts and a louder voice than everybody else and make sure that our issues and our concerns are protected. And that's really what we're going to do, and that's what we have to do to make sure that Scott Air Force Base does stick around if it's in our ability to fight for it. Thank you.
Okay, the next question. What will you do to bring green jobs to the 12th district?
Green jobs. I love this question. I love this question for so many reasons. First of all, I love this question because it's 2017. And look at you. See, it's 2018. It's even more futuristic than I proposed. So tonight, what we've known is we both pronounced Cairo wrong, and it's 2018. So it's 2018. We have an opportunity to move this district forward. We have an opportunity to move Illinois forward, and we haven't. We've been stuck in this resource curse. We've been hanging on to fossil fuels for too long, and we're behind. Illinois is behind in so many ways. All of the neighboring states have grown in industrial jobs, and we are the only state that has lost. We've lost 97,000 industrial jobs since 2007. The others have gained. And the reason why is because the others are catching up. They've started working on solar panels. They've started working on solar module installation. They've started working in biotech and clean tech. And this is what we have to do. We have to. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to start working with people in Congress that are already working on this, guys like Don Beyer, who are working on what's called like coal county revitalization programs. And they've already got little programs going on in West Virginia right now that are working. They open up training centers throughout those areas. They provide retraining, retooling inside of these green energy jobs. And guess what? It's not difficult. For these coal miners have worked their tails off. They know what real work is. You give them 3 to 6 months to learn how to do solar modulation, they'll do it, and they'll get certified. And they'll be making just as much, if not more, than they were making in coal mines without the health considerations and the concerns. And that's what we need to do. All we need, it sounds simple, but it does take some resources, it does take some funding, and it takes some will to set up these training centers, to go to these communities, to be ready and prepared to kick the resource curse out and start saying, it's time we move forward. We've got the means. We're going to fund your education. We're going to get you retooled and retrained. And we're going to get you high-paying, quality jobs that provide dignity to you and your family, that are more than just a livable wage, or give you the ability to move on. Because here's the thing. We can't afford the resource curse anymore. We can't afford the next time fossil fuels take a dip in prices. We can't afford for these communities to be promised that coal is coming back only to be let down when the president doesn't bring coal back. We can only count on the future and technology, and we have to bring it here.
I think for Illinois, we have to understand that green jobs have to be part of our portfolio. We have to have a diverse portfolio. We have to attract in certain niches, and green jobs do have to be a part of that. And it's a mix of not just new jobs, but also transitioning folks that are looking for other jobs into that sector and giving more opportunities, and green jobs definitely have to be a part of that. But we have to make sure we are laying the foundation in order for that to be possible, and we have to make sure that we're actually getting the right green jobs in terms of green energy. If you look at a map, you look at any wind chart map of Illinois, you look at the data, unfortunately, the 12th district and the southwestern part of the state of Illinois, the wind is not great. We are in the least windy part of the state. So we have to understand that going in and making sure that we are trying to invest in the right type of skills in terms of those green jobs. But if you take that same map and you look at it and overlay it with how much sun we get, what the solar opportunity is here, this is the part of southern Illinois, this is the part of the entire state which has the most sunlight. The greatest opportunity in the entire state of Illinois for solar is right here in southwestern Illinois. So we've got to have the facts, we've got to understand what it is we're exactly going for and focus on what it is that we need. But we also have to make sure if we're going to have those solar jobs here, that we do two things, that we have the skills for them, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But we also got to make sure once we have that solar energy, that we're using it. And we can't do that without with the current state of our electrical grid. There's major problems with our electrical grid in the United States. This is an electrical grid. You know, we forget in 1936, 10% of people in this country had electricity, just 10%. So it was during the Great Depression and Civil Conservation Corps and the jobs during the Roosevelt era that they put all these electrical lines in. And it was a tremendous economic boom. But those things are aging now. And we have not updated our electrical grid to be able to not just get the existing electricity we have, but to have green energy like solar energy so that it's distributed and used, and that there are folks who are actually not just using the energy for their own needs, but being able to sell that energy and being able to profit from that from Southern Illinois. You have to know where the things are flowing in order for it to be useful. You can put a lot of solar panels up, but if you don't have the grid in place to be able to do that, then you've got a tremendous problem. The other thing is, because of that, we have to make sure the skills that we are teaching in our community colleges, in our high schools, in our trade schools, and among our folks in organized labor who have trade and professional schools, that they are matched to the needs that we have for those jobs. We have to start thinking about that now. If you really want to talk long term, we should start thinking now about how we are going to take advantage of the energy revolution that's going to come with fusion. That's the future. Even some of those things like wind and solar, the curve is we're almost past that a little bit. We got to think even farther down the road towards fusion energy, and I know that's really nerdy and really obscure, but that's something that presents a tremendous opportunity down the road that we have to start planning for now.
Are all your campaign materials made by union manufacturers? Can you show us your union bug on your material?
Yes.
I think this is a question that Brendan submitted.
Nope.
No? No, I'll be honest, no. When we first started, I printed some stuff at FedEx. There it is. I'll be honest. I believe in transparency. I did, yes.
Okay.
Okay. What's your plan to combat the illegal dumping of steel and to return workers to Alton Steel and other mills like it?
Can you repeat the question?
What's your plan to combat the illegal dumping of steel and return workers to Alton Steel and other mills like it?
So I'll go to the dumping after I talk about the bringing steel jobs back. So we have a problem when it comes to steel in this country, and the biggest problem is that we have not created a protectionist tax regime to make sure that American products are protected. Now, I'm not going to jump on the Trump bandwagon and say that China is the enemy. Okay? That's not where this goes. The fact is that they are a problem when it comes to the importation of cheap goods. And the fact is that America should have a plain and simple tax system where we protect our goods. If we can make it, then it should be the most affordable product for Americans. If a Chinese firm produces it cheaper, then we tax them to make sure that we protect the American firm's steel product. Okay, and some people don't like that because they say it fundamentally messes with free trade. But I'm sorry, we need to protect American jobs. And we do that by protecting our products. And guys, this is all over the world. We have treaties with other countries that they protect their goods that they can produce. You know, if we don't produce coffee, well, we get coffee, we import coffee tax-free. But if we can produce coffee, right, we should protect it. We should always create a tax system and a tax structure that benefits American companies first, and then allows for competition to come in. Now, if the Chinese want to produce higher quality, better steel, and they can prove it, then let them come in and compete with American firms. But not by price gouging, not by manipulation of the currency, not by dumping large, cheap quantities on the market and flooding the market with it. Now, onto the steel, dumping of steel. We have a serious problem throughout this district, period, on environmental issues, on how we're getting rid of waste. And steel is just a small lingering part of the deregulation issues that we're facing that are dramatically hurting this district. And they're hurting this district in environmental ways that we cannot even explain. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Right now, there is going to be eminent domain throughout the southern parts of this district to produce new fracking mines that are going to destroy large portions of our natural resources. And the reality is that we need regulation. We need regulation on the dumping. We need to protect our environment. And we need to be hardcore about it. And it's an economic issue just as much as it is an environmental issue for us to protect our rivers, our streams, and our environment. Thank you.
First of all, I will say that I don't think China will ever make as good a steel as U.S. workers make, ever. They will always be the best. One thing we also have to do to prop up the American steel industry is make sure any federal dollars that we're going to spend on infrastructure, really any project which uses federal dollars, American dollars, is using American steel. Okay, we have to make sure our money goes to supporting American jobs. But as far as the specifics of the issue we have with steel dumping and with other countries dumping their cheap steel into the steel market and undercutting the market and undercutting the ability of American steel workers to be able to compete with them illegally, there's a way to resolve that issue with simple enforcement of the law. I'm a prosecutor. We have trade regimes, we have trade agreements that affect the production of steel. Those rules are not being enforced. And in particular, when it comes to American steel, the problem that we have is a national security issue. And we have an enforcement mechanism, something called a Section 242 action. And folks have been asking this administration to do something about it forever. My boss keeps sending a nice letter that says, please, will you keep us updated on this investigation? It's time for Congress to do something about it and enforce the Section 242. Why is that important? Why is that important? Because it's a national security issue. If we get into what I hope we don't, which is a hot war with someone like North Korea, do we think for a second that China is going to be nice enough to give us the steel we need to build our ships? No. Or build our tanks? No. Are they going to be nice enough to not just to give us the steel, but the aluminum that we need to be able to build the missiles that are there to protect us? Now, I'm not saying that is the only reason that we have to be able to protect American steel, but it is a hell of an argument as to why we have to be able to do that. We don't, obviously, you know, the trade regimes that were put in place after World War II are designed to create a global economy. We know that. That's the real reality of the world we exist in. But this is a section of our American economy where we have to be aggressive about the enforcement of the law, and if the trade agreements aren't working, we have to change those trade agreements. Unfortunately, we have a congressman that's in Congress right now that voted for fast track, basically handing over the authority of the Congress and the authority of the people who are supposed to represent us in Congress to some elite few people, some lawyers, to write the rules for trade agreements. And it's those same lawyers who wind up enforcing and interpreting the rules that they wrote themselves. It doesn't benefit American workers, doesn't benefit folks who are struggling. It benefits an elite few. And we see that not just in steel, but in any number of our trade agreements, and that's not something we can tolerate.
The next question. How will you use your role in the federal government to promote retraining for steel and coal workers to provide an alternative if there is a continued decline in those industries?
Well, I've thought about this in terms of the way the Congress operates and which subject matters that you get to participate in. Certainly going there, I'll be a new member. I'll be a junior guy with not much seniority. So one of the committees that I will fight to get on is the Labor Committee. Because I do fundamentally think that is the most important foundational thing for this area to be able to move forward. There's many other subjects and many other committees which are obviously important for the entire country and important for this area. But if we start with labor, those are where the decisions are made, where the legislation is crafted to make sure that we are providing the resources that are needed for retraining in the places that we need them and for the skills that we need. I personally I'm not giving up on Granite City Steel. I am not. I was up there a couple days before Christmas, handing out food baskets to those families who are unemployed because they shut down those mills. I think it is the right thing to do for this country to keep fighting for them and put them back to work at those mills. But as we said, with green jobs and any other section of the economy, we have to diversify our portfolio here in Southern Illinois. We've got to do that. So I think the place to start is on the Labor Committee, with the specific legislation that relates to training and skills and building a network between our high schools and our community colleges, our trade schools, and our universities. We have some great educational institutions, and we also have some great folks in organized labor that are ready, willing, and able with those apprenticeship programs if they have the funding and support that they need from the United States Congress. So that's where I'd start on that issue.
So I think these two industries are completely different. If we look at coal and steel, their growth and their decline are not necessarily the same. If we look at the steel industry, the reality is that they're losing because other states have gouged us around Illinois. Indiana's doing it cheaper. They have really cheap workman's comp. So they've got, I think it averages like $5 per employee compared to ours, which is around $15 to $20. The reality is what we need to do to get steel manufacturing boosted and built back up is we need to start figuring out ways to attract the companies to come back, attract the companies to invest more. We don't need to retool and train steel workers. They got jobs if we can just get them the jobs here. And and as long as we have infrastructure spending, we've got steel to provide. So how do we do that? Well, there's ways we can do that through our tax system, to our tax structure. Make it more convenient and make it more affordable for companies to come here, lay their roots, and employ people. We don't need to fix the workman's comp to do that. We don't need to cut workman's comp to do that. We don't need to mess with our unions to do that. And we certainly don't need right to work to do that. Mm-hmm. And the GOP would like us to believe that right to work is actually killing these jobs. They would like us to believe that the fact that Illinois is behind and Indiana, Michigan, and Missouri are ahead is because of right to work, and that's plain and simple not the truth. What's the truth is our tax structure for incentivizing businesses to come here is not on par with what they're doing. And it's not on par with incentivizing companies to come here and hire the incredibly skilled labor force that's already here in Southern Illinois for the steel industry. Now for the coal industry, There are working models across this country. And it's not necessarily the labor department that we would have to look at for coal. It's more on the sides of the environmental department and getting the EPA back up and running and getting it strong and getting the funding that's needed to protect the environment while at the same time provide funding for research, training, and development into renewable energies. Okay, so we have all those tools in our basket. All we have to do is have Congress people that are willing to go there and grab them and make sure that they're there. And a lot of that's just going to be about protecting the things that need to be protected, like the EPA, like the environmental protection laws in this district. Considerably speaking, like the Clean Streams Act needs to be reinforced. We need that back. We need that up and running. We need to protect our rivers and streams. These are the types of things that are going to allow us to go in and retool and retrain people to be attractive for these environmentally friendly labor jobs versus the coal jobs. And that's really how we're going to do it. And that's how we're going to fight for these jobs, and that's how we're going to make sure that these jobs are here. We don't need to retool and retrain the steel workers, but we certainly need to bring in new experts and new training for renewables jobs and for new energy jobs.
So, last question is kind of a mix. So you'll be giving your closing statement after this. So, in your closing statement, we would like for each of you to include your thoughts on where you and your opponent differ on issues of economics.
Well, I'll try, but I'm not sure it'll be much because I think there's a lot of common beliefs there. I think where we differ with is with Mike Bost. That's where we differ. So let me just tell you a few other things that I've left out that we haven't touched on that I think are important. Maybe we'll feel different about it. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll feel the same. I'll leave it up to you guys with your green and red side. I think one thing that we have to think about is a regional approach for our economic development. We can't think of it as just this section of the state or this section of the district. We have to think about a regional approach. There are regional efforts in terms of development and economic activity that folks have the plans for. We just need to support those folks. There's folks in 4 different counties going from Columbia all the way down to Carbondale that are trying to connect those areas and link Carbondale with the St. Louis metropolitan area. That would be a huge economic boon for both sides. There's plans in place for a 4-lane highway, but also to reutilize our rail to be able to connect those better. Their lines are there, but if you want to take transportation on the rail, it's going to take you 15 hours. 15 hours by Amtrak from St. Louis to Carbondale. There are lines that can get you there in 2, but those are right now used for different purposes. And there's other ways where we know that there's a 4-lane highway that they've been trying to push. My boss keeps ignoring those folks. They have a plan. We need to fight for that plan to be able to support them. That's what they want, to be able to link together. The ports that we have in this area, in Cairo, the Cairo Port District, that is a tremendous opportunity that has to be linked, not just for that area, but linked with the Kaskaskia River Port District, which I'd like to see that port district take over the Southwestern Illinois Port District, which is now defunct, and get that running up, which covers the area on the riverfront of East St. Louis, Sauget, Fremont City, those areas. Those things need to be linked together, and we need to make sure those 2 port districts at one end of the district and the other end of the district are not competing against each other, but they have a common plan in terms of selling their ability to bring not just economic stuff out, but also bring imports into the United States up the Mississippi, in addition to what we're trying to export down the Mississippi to the rest of the world. We have to have a regional approach. One thing we haven't talked about is the Farm Bill. That is not just important to farmers, ladies and gentlemen, okay? That is important in terms of the safety network that they have to have in order to be able to continue to farm, particularly when we have low commodity prices, and they're not doing so great at the moment. They have to have that safety net in order to be able to continue to produce food. But 80% of the Farm Bill goes to nutrition. And that's what, with this tax bill, that's what they are going to attack. This is the first time we've had the Republican Party control of the House, the Senate, and the White House at the same time a Farm Bill is going to be passed. The first time ever. We're in a dangerous position with the Farm Bill because it's going to cut nutrition to elderly folks and lower income folks. Those are things that I think have to be an economic priority for us, not just in this region, but for the country, and to the extent that we differ on it, I'd be surprised, but I certainly think we differ on it when it comes to Mike Boss.
I don't think you're going to get an answer to this question where it's directly us saying there's a difference. I think the biggest difference that I have from most politicians in general, specifically Mike Boss, and even some inside of the establishment, is that I believe that generally speaking, all of our issues, whether it be economic, social, whether it be redlining, whether it be racial issues, I believe that all of it boils down to the fact that we no longer have an ability to work together across an aisle because we have money in politics. Because we've become so addicted to big money in politics. We've dumped so much money into races. And we've started treating this like a game. Like it's who can spend the most money and win. And it's not. What I've learned more about this district and about politics is that this is genuinely a people person business. This is genuinely about representation. This is genuinely about understanding each and every citizen and their needs. And that's what differs the most when I look at how I believe politics should be and how politics is. Politics has become you being a number and me figuring out how much I need to spend on each one of you as a vote, versus me wondering what goes on in your daily life and feeling empathy for you and feeling I need to connect to you and understand your issues. And that's really what it all boils down to when we talk about it. Now, when we talk about Southern Illinois, you know, we've kind of gone back and forth on all these issues. You know, if we sum it up, what needs to be done here, we have to have a diverse economy. We have to diversify a lot of things. You know, Brendan finally brought up, and it didn't get brought up much during tonight's conversation, agriculture. You know, money in politics has actually put agriculture in kind of a small niche here in Southern Illinois. We've been pigeonholed to soy and corn when we have so much more potential than that. We've got growers down in Southern Illinois right now that are ready to do organic. They're ready to diversify. But we've made it so systematized. We've made it so governmentally controlled. We've put so much money into protecting corporate interests that we no longer allow ourselves to be a diversified economy. We no longer allow for a farmer to choose to grow a more profitable product like a rare organic tomato or a cucumber. We've pigeonholed him to say his 500 acres need to be rationed into corn product. And guys, this is really all boils down to money in politics. We've become so controlled. We've become so manipulated. We've become so not representative in what we do because we've let money control everything. And that's where I'm different. Thank you. Is this like we just look at you? You can all put up greens now.
Okay, well, we all had fun tonight. We learned a lot, and it's at the end of the room. And I would like to thank you all for coming. Thank all the groups that put on this occasion. And I would like to point you guys to this table over here. This has the upcoming events. Oh, sorry. I would like to thank you guys for coming in. Spending your time here and giving us.
I'm so sorry. I thought people were.
My bad.